Meet Frank Ocean, an artist who is driven by his heartbreak, creativity, and most of all, passion for music. These traits are so clearly prominent in Frank Ocean's work. Not only is he already considered one of the best artists of all time, but the only artist from the 2010s to have his album Blonde rank in the top 5 greatest albums of all time. When you make a body of work that great, some of your work may overshadow your other not-so-popular works of art. That's where Seigfried comes in. A song that manages to shine behind the songs like Ivy, Godspeed, Pink Plus White, Nights, White Ferrari, Self-Control, but never quite understood by many people. Besides its beautiful musical arrangement and vocals from Frank Ocean, its lyrics hold so much weight. Many people leave even more confused when they try to understand it, but today you'll leave with a different kind of appreciation for Siegfried. It might just be the best song on Blonde. You also might be asking yourself why this song is even called Siegfried. Well, the name Siegfried has several cultural resonances that Frank may be channeling, but the most popular is that Siegfried was a warrior in Norse mythology. In folklore, Siegfried slays the dragon and rescues the princess. He is then considered a standard figure of bravery and popularized through the operas of Richard Wagner in the 1800s. I mean, there are other interpretations of the significance of Siegfried. Many people at the time of the release of the song speculated that maybe Frank named it after his ex-lover at the time, Willie Cartier, who has a resemblance to the description of Siegfried. The song might also reference Siegfried Sassoon, a British war poet who had both homosexual and heterosexual relationships, mirroring Frank Ocean's own experiences with bisexuality. Sassoon was a soldier, which could explain why Frank repeatedly mentions bravery in the song. Additionally, Siegfried had a close friend, Wilfred Owen, who was deeply in love with him and wrote many love letters to him. Frank may be drawing a parallel between himself and Wilfred Owen, relating his own experiences and emotions in the song to the relationship between Owen and Sassoon. The story in the song is hard to follow, but it still has a clear structure. It shifts from Frank Ocean's love life to his inner thoughts, and then back to his love life. In the first verse, Frank Ocean starts by talking to a lover from a failed romance and then reflects on his own life. His thoughts get deeper, moving from questioning his life choices to thinking about his own mind and God. The song then returns to the theme of lost love and ends with the lines, "I do anything for you in the dark." The first verse opens with a reference to a failed relationship in the first 4 lines. Frank appreciates the physical beauty of the person he loves, which most people believe was Willie Cartier at the time. Frank struggles to connect with Willie emotionally and understand him on a deeper level. However, Frank can't connect with his lover emotionally because he doesn't know him well enough to gauge his fears. I also interpreted this as Frank's inability to be emotionally committed to someone because at this stage in his life, he doesn't know how to express himself properly. So how would he be able to read or understand the emotions of his lover if he can't understand his own? This lack of connection is echoed in the following lines, where he admits he can't connect with anyone. In the next 3 lines, after possibly referencing a past male lover, the song shifts from focusing on that failed romance to Frank's broader struggles with intimacy. Frank's unique personality and his challenges with his sexuality make it difficult for him to fit into mainstream society. When he says, "I can't relate to my peers," he might be expressing how alienated he feels because his views on love differ so much from other famous male artists or his peers. Even though Frank avoids labeling his sexuality, his relationships with men have caught the public's attention, and he's become known as an LGBTQ artist. LGBTQ artists often face pressure to represent their entire community, and because Frank doesn't like being labeled, he might feel disconnected from both the LGBTQ community and mainstream society. The line, "I'd rather chip my pride than lose my mind out here," shows Frank's desire to pull back from the intense curiosity and expectations of his fans. He doesn't want to follow the same path as his peers, even if it means being seen as weak. At the end of the day, Frank just wants to be happy with who he is. In the next 3 lines, Frank expresses his dislike and distaste indirectly about the American dream of settling down with your wife and having kids. While Frank Ocean often thrives in ambiguity and his straightforward language, he turns these lines into a universal truth. He starts by looking around and feeling like an outsider simply because he wants freedom from the constraints of ordinary American life. The stakes are Frank's pride. He acknowledges that by choosing a different path, he's accepting that others might see him as less than, This anxiety surfaces when he refers to himself as a fool, as if he's questioning whether he should just move and settle into a more conventional life. Frank might also be reflecting on the struggles he faces as a queer man who feels societal pressure to settle down with a woman despite his interest in men. By saying he wants to live outside, he suggests that stepping away from these societal expectations will allow him to live his life on his own terms, free from those pressures. But we'll come back to that in depth later when we reach the second verse. The closing lines of the first verse are, "I'm not brave." In these lines, Frank saying he is not brave could mean two things. The first being that Frank is saying he is not brave enough to live a life of dissatisfaction just because it's expected of him by society. Frank would rather live the life he wants and have no regrets. He is not brave enough to use his life to please other people. Another meaning could be that oftentimes when someone comes out, they get empty cliches about how they are so brave. However, being brave is not the same as being honest, as trying to exist as yourself in the world. In fact, calling someone brave for disclosing a part of their identity functionally reduces them to the struggle of being that thing, focusing on its negative aspects and not on offering support or acceptance. Calling someone brave also puts pressure on them to stay strong, to muffle their own doubts and fears because they are setting an example for others. In the second verse, the second two lines, "Been living in an idea from another man's mind." Frank is likely pointing out the irony that many people base their lives on religious beliefs that they believe come from God. From his perspective, though, these popular religious ideologies are just ideas created by other humans just like him. If that's the case, he argues, he should be free to live by his own code of conduct rather than following outdated views set by others. I also think it's important to note that Frank's view of God is not bitter but just curiosity and wanting to belong somewhere where he can just be himself. He tackles a similar topic on Bad Religion, a song from his debut album Channel Orange. As the verse goes on, Frank sings, "I'd rather live outside." Okay, remember when I said we would come back to the line, "I'd rather live outside" from the first verse? To talk about it more in depth, that line is reinforced in the second verse as well, so let's break it down. By the way, please like and subscribe if you are enjoying the video. It might be confusing, but stay with me. So, my interpretation of the line, "I'd rather live outside," is that I think Frank is using a powerful metaphor for him choosing his freedom over conforming to societal expectations. But this is where I think Frank's writing ability really shines through. Just like when many young queer people who come out to unsupportive parents, they often face rejection and are forced to live outside because they are usually kicked out of the house by their parents or guardian, etc. But because they are rejecting the conventional path of having a wife and kids, Frank feels he is being pushed away by society for refusing to settle into a predictable, conventional life. In this sense, living outside symbolizes Frank's rejection of a stagnant, predefined existence. It represents his desire to escape from the pressures and constraints imposed by others and to live authentically according to his own truths and values. By choosing to live outside, Frank embraces a life that is true to himself, rather than conforming to societal norms or expectations. This metaphor highlights his struggle to stay true to who he is, even if it means being marginalized or misunderstood by society. Drugs also come up in Frank's music quite frequently. In this case, it's Molly. Frank repeats, "This feels how Molly must feel," and he is emphasizing the powerful, overwhelming emotions he is experiencing. He's drawing a comparison between the high and emotional state brought on by Molly and the profound feelings he's going through. Essentially, he's using Molly as a metaphor to express the depth and intensity of his current emotional experience. "This is not my life, it's just a fond farewell to..." We move on to the bridge. Frank references Elliott Smith's song, A Fond Farewell, which is from Smith's album From a Basement on a Hill. In Smith's song, the main character struggles with drug addiction and ends up taking one last hit of heroin as a final goodbye. In these lyrics, Frank Ocean is expressing his discomfort with how society has changed without his input and how he's caught up in its shallow aspects. He says goodbye to his old self, acknowledging that he can't separate who he is now from his past. He's trying to be brave and challenge modern values he doesn't agree with. Basically, Frank is brave enough to challenge society for putting him in a box on what kind of life he should live, but he is not brave enough to conform to conventional ways of living. The third verse instantly opens with an interesting reference to Nirvana. In Buddhism, Nirvana is a state of perfect bliss that comes at the end of a soul's cycle of reincarnation, achieved when it lets go of self and desires. The idea of Nirvana also appears in Nights. Usually, when people talk about Nirvana, they often mean a state of complete enlightenment or happiness. Frank, reflecting on a past relationship, brings him feelings of eternal bliss with that person. The next lyrics are probably the ones that had most people confused. The lyrics,
"Where's the feathers on my dash from a phoenix? There with my crooked teeth and companion sleeping, yeah."
well, the phoenix is a mythical creature that burns itself to ash rather than leave behind even a feather. For Frank, the spirit of Nirvana, or pure joy, is just as rare and elusive as this mythical bird. Frank feels like he's dreaming within a dream, trying to find meaning and insight in a complex web of thoughts, much like philosophers Sartre and Philip K. Dick explore. He gets lost in his thoughts, hoping to catch a glimpse of God. He imagines a dreamer who, in their hopeful and faithful pursuit, sees a hint of God. However, despite his efforts, Frank can't achieve that same glimpse of God. Just like the phoenix's feathers, the glimmer of God and true Nirvana remain incredibly rare and out of reach for him. In the last verse, Frank uses a play on words to highlight his shift in mindset.
Less morose and more present. Dwell on my gifts for a second. A
The
moment.
term present refers to both the gift of the current moment and the idea of being in the present. By emphasizing that the present is a gift, Frank suggests that it's worth stepping out of his negative thoughts to appreciate life right now. He's moving away from his gloomy outlook and aiming for a more positive perspective. But this newfound resolution is quickly challenged by the next lines, which turn into more morbid reflections. Frank contemplates the fragility of our existence and how life can end at any moment, casting doubt on the stability of his positive shift in mindset. He mentions the solar flare that narrowly missed Earth in 2012, which could have caused massive destruction. NASA estimates there's a 12% chance of such an event occurring in the next decade. This highlights our lack of control over our fate. One random, catastrophic event could render us powerless. Throughout the album, Frank contemplates this idea, focusing on how uncertain and fragile life can be. He's exploring how such vulnerability and lack of control affect his own life and thoughts. So he uses drugs like shrooms and Molly to escape the sadness from his failed relationship, or to have a therapeutic cry about it. The outro is mainly about Frank, who is so deeply committed to this person that he's willing to do anything for them, even if it means working in secret where no one can see. He wants to show that his efforts aren't about seeking attention or approval. He just wants to do his best for this person. He's desperate to please his lover, even when they're not in the public eye, knowing they can't always be together openly. This could also be a loose metaphor for being in the closet. Frank might be in love with someone who is closeted, so any actions he takes for this person must remain private and out of the public's view. Ultimately, Sigfreed is a deep exploration of the internal struggles faced by young adults today. After listening to the song, you might wonder, how much of my life is shaped by someone else's ideas? How much of my life is directed by others? How much do I hold back because of fear, insecurity, or the worry of being judged by parents, friends, partners, or society? The song challenges us to recognize these influences, even though it can be a humbling and difficult realization. It asks whether we can be brave enough to confront these fears, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, to overcome our insecurities and to take control of our lives instead of letting others dictate them. The beauty of making such a versatile and layered song is that there will be endless interpretations, and I'd love to hear yours as well, from a specific line in the song or the song in general. I didn't even mention how beautifully sung this song is. This just shows how captivating the lyrics and the production are. Well, that's it for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and suggest songs you might like to see on the channel, and I'll pick the suggestion with the most likes. Thank you for watching, appreciate music, and I'll see you next time.